So we're blessed again to hear Orland's voice of wisdom and healing. And what can I say, Orland?
We never know. And that's why we have to stay present and do what we must do. We never know when this gap will change time and change the pattern in our lives in such a way that we will have to be seen by someone else to know that we're really different. And it's in a wonderful aspect of this story that a person knows something about themselves, but they're confirmed by someone else. They're given a type of seeing. We use the word sawubona in Southern Africa. Sawubona is a Zulu word that says, we see you. And the response is, yebo sawubona, yes, we see you too. The idea that sight is an agreement. That if we're to see our whole way into our life, into the world, we take with us the eyes of those who have seen that way before, but also the fact that we meet people on the way to where we're going that see us, seeing them. And in this mutual confirmation of vision, something is drawn out into the intelligence of our own life. So I so much appreciate this this way in which the story helps to narrate a certain kind of visual imagery of what is manifesting out of the changes that occurs in a person's life. And we can see it in each other, the changes that are manifesting out of our struggles and victories. And it's good to name it when we see it. To say, I saw that.
Sabuna or
Sawubona. Sawubona. We're moving towards this ritual space. Well, in fact, we've been in it. When we're deepening the context of why ritual happens. Ritual happens when we review our life and know that it was not an accident that the things happen the way they happen. And when we take account of our story deeply enough, we realize that we were always in a ritual. Our life is a ritual. Our relationships are rituals. And we can actually do something more creatively with it. To know that it's not predetermined by, say, providence or spiritual powers that your life is the way it is. And it's not just up to you that your life is the way it is. In the dynamics of ritual, you set an intention and you allow other things to contribute to what happens. You say, this is what I am willing to give. What do you have? And in this whole creative world, where other kinds of events are prepared, our intention affects them. And things then, so ritual is seeding into the world of possibilities something that will become probable. We're asking for a co-creative relationship with spirit and people to be able to witness something that we can call reality. What I spoke about a few days ago was that reality in becoming. we are on this threshold always deciding what reality should be. But the trouble is this, that's not up to us for it to be what it should be by ourselves. The thing we call reality is almost like a dialogue. It requires another human being because we have to understand certain things in a unique way to say that we share a reality. That our story wouldn't be as meaningful without the other characters that shape it. We can't tell a story that is only about me. There's no such story. Our own story have to do with other people. So much about other people. And that's what makes the human story so intriguing. Because we couldn't make it up by ourselves. And we couldn't live it out by ourselves. And the reality of it is such that there's more waiting to happen if we decide with whom it's going to happen. And it can be even more accurate as to what happens, because you can make the agreements about what happens. It doesn't always go according to plan, but this is the thing about hope and faith, is that we cultivate a capacity to trust that what happens could become meaningful. And that's why ritual is the way to make things meaningful. It doesn't give us exact realities, but it gives us exact meaning to allow the realities that we live in, even though it might even be contrary and paradoxical, to be meaningful. And it heals. Ritual heals for the fact that it provides something that we can't make up just out of the rational mind. It opens a space where other intelligences contribute to what becomes meaningful to us. I've been understanding this process of Indaba for a number of years now, and we shared that Indaba is the term, I have something important to tell you, but it's like telling the story that we heard today. And I like the image that if it's told, it does something differently to the psyche, to the mind, than if it's just read. And that's why oral tradition is not just a fact that people didn't know how to write. No. It was the fact that in telling it, reality becomes more defined by what we can actually do with the story while it's being heard and told. It becomes a ritual. And by the time the story is finished being told, we're changed. In the traditions of Southern Africa and some other places in the world as well, there's songs and stories that if they're told with this specific understanding, you are initiated by the time it's finished. You'll remember things that no one has ever told you before, because in the psyche is the cosmos. And they call it Song of the Stars. And they sing these songs still. And as I hear this song, in the mood of the song is an old story. is a hope. Did you feel it? Did you feel the hope in the song? Our psyche knows it. Doesn't matter about the words. You can hum it and get the same thing.
Tell us the story.
Pardon me?
Tell us the story.
Yeah.
Don't be sidetracked.
The endaba of our lives, the stories of our lives, to say, I really have something important to tell you. We have to trust that when we meet someone. If we want to step further closer to the threshold of change, stop anyone at any moment and say, I have something important to tell you. And let it be something that is not so much just about the facts of what happened. It can be about a hope of what you want to happen. Even that's a blessing. When you ask someone to say, can you agree with me for this moment? I need to change something in my life. Could you just stop and agree with me? To heal. You don't have to tell them the whole background of the story. You just to say, I need someone right now to make the agreement that I'm needing to change. And sometimes the stranger does it even better than the friend who knows you and says, you've said that before. And nothing has changed. The stranger saying, okay, I want to see it happen. I'm going to be so direct with you. And they're going to wait there to see you change. They're going to wait for that moment to see the metamorphosis. And it's their trust and faith in you that makes it happen. This is the level of knowing. The level of knowing is not the facts that people already know. It's the fact that someone wants to see something happen in a miraculous way, that because they do, it happens. And it has to, when I work with therapists and healers and doctors and saying, sometimes when you know too much about your patient, you don't give them enough an opportunity to heal. So I thought, what if it was you? What would you do? If the diagnosis was yours as a healer, what would you do? So that moment when that person has to be given a diagnostic, even a prognosis, you make the agreement with them. What would you want? What do you want? This is what the facts are, but what do you want? Let's make it a ritual. Turn it over to another kind of healing. Because no amount of facts will change anything. The power to act comes that every moment of action has a moment of irrationality in it.
Say that again.
Every moment of action, every moment of decision has a moment of irrationality in it. That when we consider all the things we know, right before we decide, we give it up. And the action comes out of a kind of freedom to be prepared to witness what is new about the change, what arises out of the decision. We actually are wanting to know what arises out of the decision, not what got me to the decision. The real human consciousness is on the other side of the decision. And we want to know, what if? And that's where the courage and the heart and the will to act comes. Because we can always be mistaken and we can always wrong based on the cultural things. But the faith is that on the other side of that, we know better. We know better already about who we are. to heal, we give ourselves permission to enter that. And we ask for mutual consent of others to enter that. So I'll give that picture. There is some thoughts and experiences in your own mind that might be happening now. That anything you want to share or ask. Sorry, I didn't. So, we in the everyday cultural mind, we're taught to believe things to reinforce why we do them. And in the sense of ritual, the suspension of the disbelief is the fact that we have to, in a sense, want something to happen because we trust in possibilities. And the dynamics of possibilities is that in the human heart and mind is a language, a method, a procedure of creating out of nothing. Nothing has to be given for cognition of the heart. We call it love. There's no prerequisite for it. You do it because you know how. And do it because you want to do it. And sometimes you do it because it does what it does. And we benefit from the fact that it arises out of a time of spontaneous grace, and we know that we are in love. But this is a kind of preparation in the mind to be in ritual space. It's like being in love. You don't have to believe in it. You experience it. And it is in this creative giving of one's sense of self that the power of ritual takes hold. And what could happen happens because we're available to it. If we are not available, ritual can't happen. Because it has to happen through, it has to pass through and enter the world through this kind of trust in the empowering of the heart and mind and will, and through community, which in a sense it doesn't just have to be about me. And sometimes we do rituals for someone else in a better way that they can do it for themselves. Sometimes they don't always believe in themselves to need the things that could actually happen in their life. They may not even know it's possible. Does that help this, Steve? The picture of... Yes.
Hold on a second. My daughter went to the University of Chicago, as I did, and she majored in anthropology and she minored in African civilization. And before I could ask her how she ever expected to make a living, she said, "So long, Dad, I'm going to Africa." And she went 800 miles up the Congo River to serve in a church-related function. And the first thing she told me was what you said at the very beginning, this idea of seeing the other as a constitutive act. Because she reported to me that when she met someone on the path, that the greeting was, "I see you." And the other person greeted back, I see you. Because somehow or other that greeting confirmed the other in a way that very much needed to be confirmed in the circumstances in which they were walking, which was often a dangerous circumstance. And so I wonder how would that work here, where we say hi, hello, or something like that, which has a kind of recognition to it, but not very constitutive. So I just triggered that triggered my memory of my daughter's report back from where she was, and there ought to be a way where we can make that more real with each other.
It happens in eye contact. Even without verbal expression, eye contact is a transfer of ritual time and space. Naturally, for human beings, the seeing is the fact that we enter proximity to something in the soul. But this is where what John was speaking. If we are passive, we don't confirm that moment. So it as not so much just for the other, is that there's something in us that wants to say, I have something to say. Really, I have something to say. And we've been asked and cultured to keep suppressing that. Well, speech is will. Speech is also our will. If people are told to shut up for too long, they will stop acting. Speech is will. Speech is prayer. Will is prayer. Over time, all of the things that are sacred about what happens in the first 3 years of life, when a human being is learning how to put into the words their spiritual intention. In the acquisition of language, we're learning to divine the world's future. And to say this is it. But we have to practice saying that about ourselves. So it is. Robert asked for a story. I want to share a brief story about the power of the mind, in a way. This is a real mentorship healing thing that happened a few years ago with a young friend in Los Angeles who had used drugs, and he had split his mind. He had left a state of normal, rational thinking, and was hospitalized, and I was called in by his mother and asked to consult with the case. And there was no coherency, no way to actually dialogue with him. So part of my practice of this Ndaba is that, yes, you can still find a person, and it takes time. In fact, it took 20 hours a day for 2 weeks to find the cognitive state where we can say, Sawubona, I see you. Now, in the delusion, I'm the only real person. While he is having this crisis, we can have a real conversation, because I know him in the context of what happened before then. So the process occurs over these 2 weeks, and as I find a way into this kind of event. Now, for me, I had to almost like disbelieve everything that was normal for me. For 20 hours, I had to trust being in a different dimension of understanding. Because the first thing a person stays further in that realm if they're misunderstood. The challenge for persons with mental crisis is that they're misunderstood. And that is the exile. Not the crisis, the fact that we can't understand it. If we can understand it, a dialogue can happen. If a dialogue can happen, we can recalibrate reality. We can make reality now here. So I give him 3 things to say. I am here. The neurophysiology of speech is that if I say I am here, I have to be. I have to do what I say. So he didn't resist. I am here. And since no one was concerned that he can say that 100 times a day, they left him alone saying, I'm here. Then I'm safe. Where is my boundary? If I'm safe, meaning I create autonomy and I create sovereignty over the field of consciousness that is my soul, my life. That's a huge territory, but I'm safe. Regardless of the dangers, I'm safe. We have to make that agreement with ourselves. In order to find courage, we have to say it. I'm safe. And I am myself. You can't be anybody else. The other conversations that's going on in his head becomes distinct when you say, I am myself. And rather than you think you're saying it, you hear it as someone else saying it. So this took 2 weeks. By the time we got him out of the psychiatric hospital after the 2 weeks, it required a ritual to stay in it. So his family couldn't accommodate that. So he went into a relapse to put him back into the hospital. So one day I was speaking with him, and the psychiatrist looking at us, having a conversation, and I'm understanding it, and he probably thought I was crazy for understanding him. And so he turned to the young man and said, are you hearing voices? And he said, yes. He said, well, what are the voices saying? He said, are you hearing voices? He didn't laugh. He just didn't get it. So I said, he couldn't understand a joke. If you can't understand a joke, you can't heal that. Right. Get the joke. So what happened though, I was talking about the mechanisms of generation. 2 months into this crisis, we had got word that his daughter, his girlfriend had gone into labor. She was in another hospital in labor. And I was at the psychiatric hospital with him getting evaluated and hoping that they would give us another chance to take him home where we could do some more work. The moment his child was born, we got the call. He came right back into consciousness and never left again. So we can say, we don't know what initiation fully takes hold of the person that becomes parent to someone else's destiny that says, no, we made an agreement that I need you. No, there's nothing in that medical chart that will prove what happened that day. You have to know the story to know what happened that day. And to some degree, don't even to trust that there's another level of reality that we may never know why his mind came all the way back. Take a couple more, and then.
Comment on your own process of working with dismantling your fears in that process. I know, like in healing, there's I don't know, there's so much, I imagine we're holding on to a lot of things that keep us from changing because, again, we want to be saved, so we have to believe us should be saved. I'm wondering about your own process in doing that, and also just, I guess you're already addressing that, but the temptation, in therapy, like there's a lot of emphasis around diagnosing, he's bipolar, he's borderline, he's got this family history, he's got these habits, and understanding on that level, and that's how you work with the person. And you're going sort of, I think, beyond all that in a way. And how do you work with your own, like, continually dismantling your own maybe beliefs or fears to be able to do that?
Well, my practice since I was very, very young, as a child, I spent 2 hours in some form of contemplation. I learned later it was. But for me, it was to concentrate my will, concentrate my attention. Attentiveness, which is natural to all of us, is not inherited by the human being from genetics. There's no genetic gene for attentiveness. It's a power of the human archetype. When that archetype is able to be utilized, and we utilize it for everything that we do, we put intention or attention to things. Something begins to happen. You become aware that you are a witness to everything that happens in your life. So there are times when we know something is happening, or something may have already happened and we didn't know, we weren't aware that it actually happened. But you can awake your consciousness to know what's going on in your life. Not that you can avoid it or change it, but you can know that it's happening. And this is the wellness of the human potential for healing. It's not that you wouldn't get the wound, it's that you know that you're still well. It's not that you wouldn't get ill, it's that you know you're still well. And you can decide to be even more well. Illness does not stand at the opposite of wellness. Wellness are stages of consciousness in which illness happens. So they said death is in the middle of a long life. So illness is in the middle of wellness. And there's lesser degree or greater degree of wellness. And you just have to find what level of will that will actually overcome the condition. What level of will overcome the condition. In 1990, and this is scientifically true, 1990, a Swiss physicist that we were working with in Los Angeles discovered a cell that is dormant in the human blood. They found that when a certain kind of energy is introduced into the blood, particularly energy of the mind, spontaneous remission happens. But it was called spontaneous because we didn't know what actually happened before 1990. But we found the catalyst for this kind of gap. It's a 5-carbon sugar. It is a pentacarbon. When it's introduced to the blood, it breaks the genetic material of the blood down to, we say, a pre-genetic level, where there's no trace of genes as we know it in scientific theory. And then this cell creates itself with that substance. And it matches and destroys every disease process going on in the physical body. And when it finishes, it goes back to sleep. Now, in a matter of 12 weeks, it builds the entire immune system to match a disease process. The survivability of most of the conditions that were treated at that time were within 12 weeks remission. Now, the thing is that the vibratory level of the physical body does not sustain that level unless we are willing to live there. And sometimes when people are given news that are they're faced with, they made a certain choice. I'm going to live. And they awake this life substance of their own ancestry, our own ancestry. It's there. It's a power of will. Then when it finished killing the disease, it breaks its membrane and it becomes light. Colloidal life just float back into the blood as vital, we call etheric vitality, that interacts with sunlight and plant energy and conversations, and it is a vibrational entity and can only be awakened with vibrational fields of energy. Free energy. And the first power of free energy that we have is the capacity to create a thought. A new thought. Not the ones we thought about yesterday, but a new thought is free energy to change the patterns that we are locked into. So I would just contribute that and invite us to think about the ritual as well.
Bishop is going to give us some words, and you heard a few of his words last night. And one of the things I love about listening to Orland speak is it kind of makes me feel like my ears need to be bigger. I need to think a little deeper, and I need to hold things in ways that I haven't ever been asked to hold them before. So every time he speaks, I'm always really happy. So Orland, please.
Yeah! Thank you. I like to begin with acknowledging again the gift of Robert's presence in the world, the giftedness in this discipline of the mind to reach beyond the everyday conventions and shape thought into things that become this living memory. Awakening things that are latent in people. And I think this is the power of thoughts. It can awake us. And wake us to not just our own potential, but as he was sharing yesterday, to wake us into the time frame that is relevant for other people's lives as well. And this kind of remembrance of this story and the book that holds it has been awakening people for the time frame in which it has been in reality. I met a young man a few days ago when I was in New York, and he said, I read this book, Iron John, 6 times, and I asked him why. And he said each time it allowed him to remember things that he had forgotten. And he was a young man, but I felt as though he was talking about some things older than his time. And I asked myself, well, what is that thing that we are trying to remember? And why? So as I listened to our sharing over the last couple of days in this quest for meaning around the story and among meaning around the wounds and turmoils of our lives, is a kind of commitment to doing something that we call healing. To bring something back into the world. And I want to answer the question that was raised the first night. What is the failure that allowed me to live? By way of beginning. I had prepared my life to go into medicine, to go into a career of being a doctor. And I put a lot of studies and shaped my life around this particular path. And on one day, while I have my first year of medical studies, a friend came to my home and asked if he could visit and stay for a while. He had a drug addiction and he needed some help, so I agreed. During the time he was staying with me, I realized that he had other physiological problems going on, and I took him to the emergency room one day and received a call that night after he was admitted from the physician asking to talk with me because they wanted to do some tests and he had refused. But he needed me to agree with him if he's going to do it. So they put him on the telephone, and I asked him, let these people do their work. You know, they're trying to help you. So we talked about it, and I picked him up the following morning, and maybe 2 or 3 days later, went back to get the results of this laboratory test. And he came out of the consulting room crying. And he looked at me and said, "Am I going to die?" I later learned that he was diagnosed HIV positive. And this question, am I going to die? I think we get a sense of it in the everyday mortal way of the path of life. Yes, we're going to die. But more so, how am I going to live with what I know? And we engage this question in a way differently than am I going to die in the everyday sense. And it took me on a journey of failing to commit to finish the things that I had committed my life to. I couldn't return from the question to my everyday life. And it took 3 years from the time he was diagnosed with this and brought this question into my life to when he actually died. But a month or so before he died, he was in hospice care, and I went to visit with him, and he was asleep. And I thought I would just return later when he was awake. And as I was turning to leave, his voice spoke to me and said, "You better do what you're here to do." And I stopped, I looked around, and I looked at him, and he was still asleep. And I thought, this is strange, but let me ask again, what did you say? And he spoke from this sleep, "You better do what you're here to do." And I asked, well, what am I here to do? In a somewhat maybe sarcastic way, but still trying to understand. And his response was, "Don't play games with me. You know what you're here to do, and if you don't do it, you will regret it." And I took a chair and sat by the bed. And I sat maybe for about 2 hours with this question in my own mind, what am I here to do? And it wasn't so much a what like career or a task. It's like, what do I want to remember about my life? And I made that my work. I made it my work. I made it my intention to do something. And when he woke up, he looked at me and said, "They don't know the kind of doctor you're supposed to be." And a few days later, I went to my school and I resigned from my career. And everyone thought, why would you do something that you had given so much time to do? But it's like they don't knew what I wanted to remember. I didn't know at that time what I wanted to remember, but I had chosen to do it. And this poem from D.H. Lawrence, "I am not a mechanism, an assembly of various sections. And it's not because the mechanism is working wrongly that I am ill. I'm ill because of wounds to the soul, to the deep emotional self. And the wounds to the soul take a long, long time, and only time can help, and patience, and a certain difficult repentance, long, difficult repentance, realizations of life's mistake, and the freeing of oneself from the endless repetition of the mistake, which mankind at large has chosen to sanctify. I wanted to understand healing. I wanted to be patient with something in my life in such a way that I come to understand what it is that we do when we are together. And how we share time. The possibility for healing for me came in knowing something about initiation that happens when we no longer can live with the patterns that we have inherited or have been accustomed to carry in our daily life. This power to begin a different sequence of events I've learned to understand as healing. And I ask myself, what is this human nature? What is this capacity? There are three areas that happens within the context of human life that I've come to understand. The part of ourselves that is inherited, and I shared a little bit about that last night, that in the physical sense, we inherit a physical constitution that has memory already designated in it. We call genetic memory. And it gives us a lineage, an ancestral lineage, that holds a particular type of creativity, genetic creativity, that prepares the body to adapt to certain historical events. So we have a past. And then we have, surrounding that, a confluence of events, circumstances, time, that influences us by the fact that we have to perceive and awake to that and do something with what we perceive every day in our life. Our senses bring the world into us. And we begin the first day of our life in the school of, we say, the everyday world. Learning to speak, learning to walk, and learning to live in it. But while we have received this past, and while we have, in a sense, been born into this environment, the human being gives something that is of his own nature. Attentiveness. Attention, which is not inherited, which is not given by our circumstances. This unique predisposition to organize something into reality, to take what's given and transform it into consciousness, into an identity, is unique for all of us, yet common to the experience that we share. And we can learn only what each other knows by the communication we do, that's facilitated by attentiveness, that brings us out of our own isolation and solitude and exile into community, into a sense of belonging. And in this belonging, do more with our own inheritance. Bring it further into understanding and further into meaning. And to someday, this is what I feel this DH Law is, that what we as mankind at large has chosen to sanctify. It is the collective bucketing of our life. We can't do it by ourselves. 'Cause the relevance of being human is to be able to communicate beyond this self-interest, beyond this given, into something that is not given. Think about community, it's not given. Sense of belonging is not given. We have to find it. We have to do something unique with our own experiences to be in the healing of belonging. Not just belonging to the inheritance of the given family lineage or the inheritance of the culture in which we are born. But this communal process that is born out of our communication, out of us doing something with our own word. What I give and what we give, that becomes an agreement that sustains both of us. This gap of inheritance, this not given potential, is a place where we can enter consciously and witness a kind of capacity to self-organize, to witness the events that prepare themselves before they manifest as a world, to set the context and meaning for what actually is true for me. It's one of Rumi's poems. It said, if anyone asks you who you are, say soul within soul within soul. But I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I gazed upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans. And I've seen its muddy bosom turned all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers.
That's Langston Hughes?
Langston Hughes.
Langston Hughes. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you.
Okay.
Run.
One in here.
Okay.